My name is Naomi, 33 years old, and somehow still healing from wounds my family inflicted. As a successful financial investigator and real estate investor, I escaped their toxicity but maintained occasional contact. Oops, I forgot to send you an invitation. My sister Chloe giggled, flashing her massive diamond ring. My dad pointed toward the exit, telling me to leave because I was socially unfit for their elite crowd. I simply smiled and said, "Do not worry, looks like we both forgot something." Before the wedding cake was even cut, my sister was in tears, begging me on her knees to come back. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. The heavy humidity of the Atlanta evening clung to my skin as I parked my unassuming sedan at the edge of the sprawling gravel driveway. The Monarch Estate in Buckhead was ablaze with golden light, projecting an image of absolute perfection into the dark night sky. Valets in crisp white jackets darted between imported luxury vehicles, opening doors for women dripping in designer gowns and men wearing custom-tailored tuxedos. This was the rehearsal dinner for the wedding of the century, or at least that is what my family had been broadcasting to every member of our church congregation for the past 6 months. I stood at the edge of the valet zone, clutching a thick envelope in my hand. Inside was a certified cashier check for $10,000. It was a sum I had been relentlessly guilt-tripped into providing by my mother Vivian, who insisted it was my absolute duty as the older sister to contribute to the extravagant floral arrangements. I smoothed down the fabric of my tailored but modest navy blue business suit and walked up the grand marble steps toward the main VIP entrance. The heavy mahogany doors were guarded by 2 large men with earpieces standing behind thick velvet ropes. When I approached, the taller guard held up a gloved hand. "Name, please," he asked, his tone strictly professional and devoid of any warmth. "Naomi Jefferson," I replied, offering a polite but strained smile. "I am the bride's sister." The guard ran his finger down a laminated list attached to his clipboard. He checked the front page, then the second page, then flipped back to the first. He looked up at me, his expression tightening with suspicion. "I am sorry, Mom. Sorry, ma'am, but your name is not on the VIP guest list or the general admission list. I cannot let you inside." I stared at him, the familiar sting of familial rejection washing over me like a bucket of ice water. "There must be a mistake," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level to hide the sudden tremor in my chest. "My parents are Desmond and Vivian Jefferson. Please let them know I am here." The guard spoke quietly into his earpiece. A few agonizing minutes passed while I stood on the marble steps, feeling the judgmental stares of arriving guests who recognized me as the family outcast. Finally, the heavy mahogany doors swung open. But it was not a welcoming committee stepping out to greet me. It was my father Desmond, accompanied by my younger sister Chloe. Chloe looked like she had just stepped out of a high-end bridal magazine. She wore a stunning ivory gown that hugged every curve perfectly, her hair styled in flawless, expensive waves. But the ugly smirk on her face ruined the elegance completely. "Oops, I forgot to send you an invitation." Chloe giggled, leaning against the doorframe and flashing her massive 3-carat diamond ring in the ambient light. "Honestly, Naomi, I figured you would feel out of place anyway. Your introverted corporate vibe really does not fit the elite aesthetic we are going for tonight. This is a high society gathering. We have legacy fraternity brothers and my sorority sisters inside. You would just stand in the corner and make everyone uncomfortable." I looked at my father, expecting him to reprimand her for such blatant, cruel disrespect. Instead, Desmond crossed his arms over his chest and pointed a stern finger toward the gravel driveway. "Go home, Naomi," my father demanded, his voice cold and devoid of any paternal warmth. "Do not make a scene and embarrass your sister in front of DeAndre's family. You know how important this merger of our families is for my standing at the church as a head elder. You always bring this dark, resentful energy everywhere you go. You are socially unfit for this crowd, and we simply cannot risk you ruining the atmosphere." I felt a coldness settle deep in my chest. Socially unfit. That was the exact phrase they used to describe me, because I preferred building my career and focusing on my financial independence over attending superficial galas and gossiping at country club luncheons. Before I could formulate a response to my father's cruel dismissal, the doors opened wider, and my mother Vivian marched out. She wore a sequined gown that caught the light blindingly, but her eyes were narrowed with furious irritation. "What is the holdup out here?" Vivian snapped her gaze, snapping toward me with immediate, undisguised distaste. She looked me up and down, her lip curling in a sneer. "You wore that cheap-looking office suit to meet the Sterling family. Thank God I told security to keep you out. I cannot have DeAndre's wealthy relatives seeing my oldest daughter looking like a mid-level desk clerk." Vivian did not wait for my response or even ask how I was doing. She lunged forward and snatched the thick envelope right out of my hand with greedy determination. "You owe us this check, Naomi," my mother hissed, tapping the envelope against her palm, as if verifying its contents. "After DeAndre was so incredibly generous to let you use his professional connections for your little consulting job, the absolute least you can do is pay for these imported floral arrangements. Now do us all a favor and quietly go out the back way before the senator arrives and sees you loitering on the steps like a beggar." The sheer audacity of her statement made my blood boil. I took a step forward, no longer bothering to mask my absolute disgust. "His connections," I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous quiet register. "Mom, I have been working on Wall Street and building my own portfolio for 10 grueling years. I built my career with my own blood, sweat, and tears through sleepless nights and endless sacrifices. Meanwhile, you completely drained my college savings account to pay for Chloe's sorority dues and her designer wardrobe so she could play the role of a spoiled princess. You stole my future to fund her fake popularity, and now you stand here crediting a man I barely know for my hard work." Vivian scoffed loudly, waving her manicured hand in the air dismissively. "Oh, please. You are just bitter because Chloe is marrying a wealthy venture capitalist while you are pushing 33 and completely alone. You should be grateful we even let you drop off the check instead of mailing it." Just as she finished her venomous sentence, the heavy doors opened one more time. DeAndre Sterling stepped out into the humid night air. He wore a custom velvet tuxedo jacket and a heavy gold watch that caught the light, but his arrogant swagger made my stomach turn instantly. DeAndre looked at me, then looked past me at the modest sedan I had parked at the edge of the driveway. He let out a loud, mocking laugh that echoed across the marble entryway. "Is this the sister you told me about, Chloe? The one who drives that embarrassing piece of junk?" DeAndre reached into the inner pocket of his velvet jacket and pulled out a sleek leather checkbook. He hastily scribbled something down, ripped the check from the pad, and crumpled it into a tight ball. He tossed it directly at my chest. It bounced off my jacket and landed on the marble steps. "There is $500, DeAndre said with a vicious smirk, pulling Chloe closer by the waist. "Take a premium cab back to whatever sad little apartment you live in. You clearly do not belong in our world, Naomi. Leave the high society life to the people who actually have money and influence." He turned to the security guards, his expression turning instantly ugly and authoritative. "Escort her off the property immediately. If she resists, call the police and have her arrested for trespassing." My family turned their backs on me, laughing together as they walked back into the opulent warmth of the grand ballroom, leaving me completely alone on the cold marble steps. I did not cry. I did not scream or beg for their love. I simply looked down at the crumpled check lying on the ground, then back up at the closed mahogany doors. A slow, chilling smile spread across my face. I turned on my heel and walked with absolute composure back to my car. I slid into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and pulled out my smartphone. I dialed a direct encrypted line that I rarely used outside of business hours. My executive assistant answered on the very first ring. "Yes, Miss Jefferson," my assistant asked, his tone sharp and ready for instruction. I stared at the illuminated windows of the Monarch estate, watching the silhouettes of my family mingling with their elite, unsuspecting guests. "Execute Phase 1. I commanded, my voice devoid of any emotion whatsoever. "I want you to immediately freeze every single escrow account associated with DeAndre Sterling. Block all incoming and outgoing transfers across all platforms. Then I want you to call the primary estate manager of the Monarch estate. Tell him the grace period is officially over. Instruct him to execute the default clause on the Sterling wedding immediately. Require full payment for the venue within the hour, or shut the entire event down right now." Understood, my assistant replied without a single second of hesitation. Consider it done. I ended the call and tossed my phone onto the passenger seat. I leaned back against the leather headrest, listening to the soft hum of my engine while staring at the grand building. My family wanted to play games with social status and wealth. They wanted to humiliate me and cast me aside like garbage while worshipping a man who was nothing but smoke and mirrors. I smiled into the darkness of the car. Enjoy the champagne while it lasts, I whispered to the empty vehicle. Because tomorrow is going to be a very long, very unforgiving day for all of you. I watched as the valets continued to park luxurious cars, entirely unaware of the storm I had just unleashed. I was no longer the scapegoat they could manipulate. The rules had changed and I was holding all the cards. I reclined my seat just enough to remain hidden in the shadows of my unassuming sedan, keeping my eyes fixed on the magnificent floor-to-ceiling windows of the Monarch estate. From my vantage point across the street, the lavish rehearsal dinner looked like a beautifully orchestrated play. The grand chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over the elite guests who mingled in their expensive designer wear. I could see the waiters carrying silver trays loaded with champagne and gourmet appetizers, weaving elegantly through the crowd of Atlanta highest society. But I knew the exact second my executive assistant executed my orders. The shift was immediate and incredibly satisfying to witness. Through the massive glass panes of the grand foyer, I saw the head wedding planner marching briskly toward DeAndre and my sister Chloe. The planner, a notorious perfectionist in the Atlanta event industry, held a digital payment terminal in one hand and a thick clipboard in the other. Even from a distance, I could read the aggressive tension in her posture. She tapped DeAndre on the shoulder, interrupting his arrogant laughter as he held court with my father and a group of local politicians. DeAndre turned around, looking visibly annoyed at the interruption. He lazily reached into his velvet tuxedo jacket, pulled out a sleek metal credit card, and handed it to the planner with a dismissive flick of his wrist. I opened my laptop resting on the passenger seat and logged into my firm-secured portal. I had full visibility of the back-end escrow system. I watched the transaction attempt flash across my screen in real time. Declined, insufficient funds, account frozen. Inside the venue, the planner swiped the card. The terminal flashed red. She handed the card back to DeAndre and shook her head, her polite demeanor clearly cracking. I watched DeAndre snatch the card back, his face contorting into an ugly scowl. He pulled out a second card, then a third. He swiped them himself, his movements growing frantic and aggressive. Declined, declined, declined. Every single account associated with DeAndre Sterling was now completely locked down by my firm compliance department. The wedding planner did not hesitate. She signaled her catering captain. Within seconds, a ripple effect of sheer panic washed through the venue staff. The waiters who had been circulating with silver trays of expensive hors d'oeuvres abruptly stopped in their tracks. They turned around in unison and marched right back into the kitchen, carrying the food away from the hungry, bewildered guests. The bartenders at the main luxury bar began pulling the premium liquor bottles down from the display shelves, packing them swiftly into crates. The service had officially been halted. DeAndre's face flushed a deep, violent shade of red. He stepped aggressively toward the wedding planner, pointing his finger in her face. I could easily read his lips through the glass. He was shouting the classic battle cry of a desperate fraud. "Do you know who I am? Do you have any idea who you are dealing with?" He threw his arms wide, trying to publicly shame the woman doing her job, desperately attempting to project the image of a billionaire insulted by a mere clerical error. Chloe grabbed his arm, looking around frantically at the elite guests who were now stopping their conversations to stare at the escalating commotion. My mother. Vivian rushed over, her face a mask of absolute horror as she realized the high society spectacle she had meticulously planned for 6 months was falling apart right before her eyes. My father Desmond followed closely behind her, his chest puffed out as he tried to intimidate the event staff into submission. But the planner simply crossed her arms, holding her ground. No payment, no party. Those were the strict terms of the Monarch Estate default clause. My smartphone lit up, vibrating aggressively against the center console. The caller ID flashed with my father name. I let it ring 3 times, savoring the absolute desperation radiating from the screen. Then I calmly pressed answer and brought the phone to my ear. Naomi Desmond hissed into the receiver, his voice a frantic, enraged whisper shout. I need you to wire $50,000 to DeAndre account right now, immediately. Do you hear me? His bank is having a ridiculous technical glitch and this incompetent wedding planner is threatening to lock the main ballroom. The senator is standing right next to the ice sculpture Naomi. Do not embarrass us in front of the senator. Wire the money this exact second. The sheer audacity of his demand was staggering. Less than 20 minutes ago, he had banished me from the property, declaring me socially unfit to breathe the same air as these people. DeAndre had literally thrown a crumpled check at my chest like I was trash. Now my father was demanding I empty my own hard-earned savings to bail out the very man who had humiliated me. No, I replied, my voice smooth, steady, and entirely unaffected by his panic. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. What did you just say to me? Desmond growled, the polished church elder facade slipping away completely to reveal the tyrant underneath. I am your father, and I am giving you a direct order. You have money saved up from that little consulting job of yours. Transfer the funds right now. DeAndre will pay you back tomorrow morning with interest once his offshore accounts clear. Do not be selfish, Naomi. Your sister is practically having a panic attack in the foyer. I am not wiring you a single cent, Dad, I said, leaning back comfortably in my leather car seat. I told you I am socially unfit for your crowd. Remember, my cheap corporate vibe does not really align with covering a $50,000 tab for a man who throws crumpled paper at women. You all wanted a high society wedding. You wanted the legacy fraternity brothers and the elite politicians. So figure out how to pay for it yourselves. Naomi Jefferson, if you do not wire this money right now, I will personally see to it that you are ruined, Desmond shouted, abandoning his whisper completely. I will publicly disown you. I will stand at the pulpit this Sunday and tell the entire congregation that you turned your back on your own flesh and blood out of spite and petty jealousy. You will be shunned by the church. You will be entirely cut off from this family. You will have absolutely no one. Do you understand me? You will be nothing. I listened to his threats, feeling the last remaining threads of daughterly affection snap and dissolve into dust. For years I had allowed them to use my fear of abandonment to manipulate me. I had funded their emergencies, fixed their mistakes, and accepted their brutal criticism just to keep the peace. But listening to him scream at me to save a scam artist wedding, I felt incredibly free. You cannot cut me off, Dad, I said, my tone turning dangerously sharp. Because I am the one holding the scissors. You think this is a bank glitch. You think DeAndre is a wealthy venture capitalist waiting on offshore funds. You are so blinded by your desperate obsession with social status that you blindly handed your youngest daughter over to a complete fraud. What are you talking about? Desmond demanded, though his voice wavered slightly, a sudden sliver of doubt creeping into his arrogant tone. DeAndre is a millionaire. He showed us his portfolio. He manages top-tier investments. You are just making up vicious lies because you are miserable and alone. He manages nothing. I fired back, my voice turning to pure ice. He is a broke, desperate con artist running a Ponzi scheme, targeting affluent black families who are too focused on their country club reputations to run a simple background check. That velvet jacket he is wearing is rented. Those luxury cars out front are leased. And that 3-carat diamond on Chloe's finger is lab-grown moissanite worth exactly $200. That is a filthy lie, Desmond roared, though the panic in his voice was now undeniable. You are a bitter, jealous woman, Naomi. I am done with you. Consider yourself dead to this family. I smiled, letting him huff and puff in his manufactured outrage. I watched through the estate windows as DeAndre began furiously typing on his phone, likely trying to access the very accounts my firm had just permanently locked. The caterers were now actively breaking down the buffet stations. Before you hang up and disown me forever, I said casually, my voice cutting through his heavy breathing, I have one very simple question for you. What? Desmond snapped. Dad, did you read the fine print on the loan you co-signed for DeAndre last month? Desmond goes completely silent. The heavy silence stretched across the phone line for so long that I could hear the faint muffled sounds of elite jazz music playing inside the ballroom. Desmond did not say a word. The arrogance that had defined his voice just moments earlier had completely evaporated, replaced by a suffocating heavy dread. He knew he had signed papers. He knew he had trusted DeAndre blindly, driven by the desire to boast about his wealthy future son-in-law to the entire church congregation. "Dad," I whispered into the receiver, letting the silence press down on him like a physical weight. "Are you still there, or did your banking app freeze up again?" "Open your email, Desmond," I commanded, my voice turning razor sharp. "I just sent you a high-priority PDF file. Look at it right now while I am still on the line, before your precious guests start wondering why the caterers are packing up the food and the bars are running dry." I heard the frantic shuffling of paper and the heavy sound of my father breathing into the phone. Through the glass windows across the street, I watched as Desmond pulled his phone away from his ear with a trembling hand, squinting at his screen while standing near the ice sculpture. Beside him, Vivian leaned in closely, her sequined emerald dress catching the golden chandelier light as she pointed impatiently at the phone, clearly wondering why her husband looked suddenly pale and ghost-like. "What is this?" Desmond finally choked out, his voice cracking with sudden, unadulterated terror. "What did you send me, Naomi? This says federal investigation. This says asset seizure." "It is not a glitch, Dad," I said calmly, leaning back and watching them through the glass. "The freeze on DeAndre accounts has nothing to do with a simple banking error. For the past 6 months, federal auditors and my firm compliance division have been tracking a massive wire fraud and money laundering ring operating right here in Atlanta. And guess who is right at the center of the web? Your beloved future son-in-law. His accounts were not frozen by accident. They were seized by federal authorities because every single dollar he claims to own was stolen through corporate shell companies and fake venture capital firms." Desmond stared at his phone screen, his fingers scrolling frantically through the financial documents I had just emailed him. The PDF contained explicit, undeniable proof of federal subpoenas, bank records, and forensic accounting trails that mapped out DeAndre's entire fraudulent lifestyle. But the most devastating piece of evidence was right there on page 4. It was a digital copy of a home equity loan agreement. My father's eyes scanned the page, and I watched his entire body stiffen through the glass window. I heard him gasp softly over the phone, a sound of pure, unadulterated panic. "No," Desmond muttered, shaking his head rapidly, as if he could erase the words from the screen. "No, this cannot be right. This is a mistake." "It is not a mistake, Dad," I said, my tone clinical and relentless. "Look closer at the signature line. That is your signature, isn't it? You did not just co-sign a harmless business loan to help DeAndre secure an office lease. You took out a $250,000 second mortgage on your family home last month. You used your own house, the house you and Mom worked for 30 years to pay off, as collateral to fund his fake venture capitalist lifestyle. And he forged your signature to pull the funds out without you even realizing the full extent of the debt. He didn't just borrow money from you, Dad. He robbed you blind. He used you as a financial patsy to keep his Ponzi scheme afloat for one more month so he could marry Chloe." Inside the venue, the shockwave hit instantly. Desmond staggered backward, nearly colliding with the expensive ice sculpture, his face completely drained of all color. He stared blankly at the phone in his hand, utterly paralyzed by the realization that he had willingly handed over the deed to his retirement and his family home to a criminal. Vivian, noticing her husband, abrupt physical collapse, snatched the phone right out of his trembling hand. She shoved the device against her ear, her face contorted with vicious rage, her carefully maintained high society facade shattering completely. "Naomi!" Vivian shrieked into the phone, her voice shrill and piercing enough that I had to pull the device slightly away from my ear. "What kind of sick, twisted game are you playing right now? What lies are you whispering to your father on the eve of your sister's wedding, Mom?" "I am just sharing some light reading material about your future son-in-law financial portfolio," I replied evenly. "You might want to take a look at page 4 yourself. It features your home address." "Shut up!" Vivian screamed, her voice trembling with furious denial as she paced frantically near the empty buffet tables. "You are a bitter, jealous, miserable spinster. You have always resented Chloe because she is beautiful, because she is charming, and because she managed to secure a successful, wealthy man while you are going to die completely alone. You fabricated these fake documents just to ruin her big day because you couldn't stand seeing someone else happy. DeAndre is a multimillionaire. He is a brilliant venture capitalist. He treats your sister like a queen, and you are just a pathetic, lying little snake trying to destroy our family out of pure spite. The sheer level of delusion was astonishing. Even with federal audit reports and forged mortgage documents staring them right in the face. My mother chose absolute willful blindness, rather than admitting she had been completely played. Her desperate need to maintain her elite social standing and her fake family perfection was stronger than basic self-preservation. "Believe whatever helps you sleep tonight, Mom," I said, letting out a cold, humorless laugh. "But while you are standing there screaming into the phone and calling me a liar, take a long, hard look around the grand ballroom. Look closely at the people you are trying to impress. And more importantly, look at the bar." Vivian paused, her screeching abruptly cutting off. Through the glass, I watched her slowly lower the phone from her ear, her eyes darting nervously toward the main bar area, where the elite guests were beginning to murmur anxiously among themselves. "What are you talking about?" Vivian muttered, bringing the phone back to her mouth with a hesitant, shaking hand. "What does the bar have to do with anything? Go ahead and ask the bartender for a glass of champagne." "Mom," I challenged, my smile widening in the darkness of my car. "Ask him to pour a glass of that expensive vintage you bragged to the church congregation about for months. Go on, I dare you." Vivian turned away from Desmond, marching stiffly across the polished hardwood floor toward the main bar. She approached the head bartender, her expression tight with arrogant authority, demanding a glass of the finest champagne for herself and the senator standing nearby. I watched every single movement through the clear glass windows. The bartender looked deeply apologetic, shaking his head and gesturing toward the service well behind him. Vivian's face twisted in anger. She slammed her hand down on the mahogany bar top, demanding to speak to the manager immediately. The bartender nervously reached under the counter and pulled out an open bottle, holding it up so Vivian could read the simple paper label. I heard my mother's sharp, indrawn breath echo faintly through the phone line she was still holding. "It is sparkling cider," Vivian whispered, horror dripping from every single syllable. "It is cheap grocery store sparkling cider." "Of course it is sparkling cider, Mom," I said smoothly, letting out a soft chuckle. "Because the real champagne, along with the imported caviar, the designer table settings, and the custom ice sculpture, was never actually paid for. DeAndre bounced the deposit check 3 weeks ago. The real champagne was repossessed by the distributors this afternoon, before it even arrived at the loading dock. You are serving cheap children party cider to a United States senator and the elite leaders of our church, and you are doing it in a house that your new son-in-law just secretly mortgaged without your permission. Have a wonderful rehearsal dinner, Mom. I will check in on you tomorrow when the foreclosure notices arrive." I hung up the phone before she could scream another word. I dropped the device onto the passenger seat, rolled down my window just an inch, and watched as Vivian dropped the phone from her hand, letting it shatter against the marble floor, while Chloe burst into hysterical floor shaking, sobbing in the center of the empty, unfed ballroom. The first domino had officially fallen, and the entire house of cards was coming down. The heavy silence on the line was finally broken by a sharp click. Desmond had ended the call. I sat comfortably in my car, adjusting the air conditioning, as I watched the magnificent collapse of his carefully constructed reality unfold through the tall glass windows of the grand ballroom. The atmosphere inside had shifted from elite sophistication to absolute pandemonium. The sudden realization that the Sterling family wealth was entirely fabricated spread through the high society crowd like a wildfire. Guests who had been elegantly sipping their cheap sparkling cider just moments before were now huddled in tight whispering circles. They pointed blatantly at my parents, their judgmental stares piercing through my mother's fake emerald gown. The pristine facade of the Jefferson family was crumbling in real time. The catering staff moved with ruthless efficiency. I watched a team of waiters storm out of the kitchen with large plastic bins swiftly clearing the expensive appetizers from the silver trays. But the most visually satisfying moment came when the elite floral design team arrived. They did not care about the distinguished guests or the United States Senator standing nearby. They had not been paid, and they were taking their inventory back. Workers in black polo shirts marched into the ballroom and began literally stripping the massive imported floral centerpieces right off the dining tables. They pulled white orchids and cascading roses from their crystal vases, tossing them unceremoniously into heavy garbage bags. The extravagant beauty of the room was being violently dismantled. Through the glass, I spotted Chloe. My beautiful, arrogant younger sister was standing near the empty buffet, completely frozen in shock. She watched in pure horror as a worker grabbed a massive bouquet of white hydrangeas from the table right next to her. The blood drained from her face, leaving her looking pale and terrified. Her perfect bridal illusion was being torn apart petal by petal. Chloe spun around, her eyes darting frantically across the room as she searched for DeAndre, but he was currently surrounded by 3 angry venue managers demanding immediate answers. Unable to handle the public humiliation, Chloe grabbed the heavy skirt of her ivory designer gown, lifted it above her ankles, and sprinted away from the crowd. She pushed through the heavy wooden doors, leading toward the private bridal suite, fleeing the scene of her own social execution. My phone screen lit up on the passenger seat. The caller ID flashed Chloe. I let it ring twice, savoring the absolute desperation radiating from the device, before sliding my finger across the screen to answer. Naomi. Chloe shrieked into the speaker, her voice a hysterical, high-pitched wail that echoed inside my quiet car. What is happening? The vendors are stealing my flowers. They are taking the food away. DeAndre credit cards are not working, and Mom is crying in the hallway. You have to fix this right now. I leaned back against the leather seat, keeping my tone entirely conversational. I cannot fix a federal asset seizure, Chloe. Your fiancé is a criminal running a massive Ponzi scheme. His accounts are frozen because every dime he has is stolen money, including the money he used to buy that lab-grown diamond you are currently wearing. Shut up, Chloe screamed, the sound so piercing I had to pull the phone away from my ear. You are lying. You are just a bitter, jealous loser. DeAndre is rich. He is a venture capitalist. You are a financial consultant, Naomi. This is your job. I do not care what computer error is happening at his bank. You need to hack the system, call the bank, and force them to release his funds immediately. Transfer the money from your own accounts if you have to. Fix it. I let out a soft, genuine laugh. Hack the system. Do you think real life works like a television show, Chloe? I am a senior partner at a private equity firm, not a magician. And even if I could magically unfreeze accounts seized by the federal government, I would not spend a single penny to save your fake wedding. You are going to ruin my life. Chloe sobbed, her breathing turning ragged and uneven as panic fully consumed her. All my sorority sisters are out there. The most important people in Atlanta are out there watching my wedding get repossessed. If you do not wire the $50,000 to the venue this exact second, I swear to God I will destroy you. I will go on Instagram right now. I have 50,000 followers, Naomi. I will go live and tell every single one of them that you hacked DeAndre accounts. I will tell the entire world that you stole money from us because you are a miserable, lonely woman who could not stand to see her younger sister happy. I will ruin your professional reputation forever. Her threat hung in the air, pathetic and desperate. It was the exact same manipulation tactic she had used since we were teenagers. Whenever she faced the consequences of her own disastrous actions, she simply threatened to weaponize her popularity against me, fully expecting me to fold. But the woman she was threatening tonight was not the frightened teenager she used to bully. You are going to tell everyone I stole from you? I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper. Just like you told everyone I stole your car in high school when you actually crashed it into a street lamp while driving completely drunk. Chloe, breathing hitched. She stopped crying instantly, her silence screaming volumes. I remember that night perfectly. I continued, my words striking like physical blows. You were terrified you would lose your pageant title if the police arrested you for a driving under the influence charge. So Dad forced me to take the blame. He told the police I took the car without permission and crashed it. I lost my clean record. I lost my academic scholarship opportunities because I had a massive disciplinary mark on my file. I worked double shifts at a diner to pay the property damages while you walked across a brightly lit stage wearing a sparkling crown, smiling for the cameras like a perfect, innocent angel. You built your entire foundation of success by stepping directly on my neck. That was different. Chloe stammered, her arrogant tone, suddenly replaced by the trembling voice of a cornered child. We were just kids, Naomi. Dad handled it because I had a real future ahead of me. You were just going to be a boring accountant anyway. My reputation mattered more. Your reputation is nothing but a carefully constructed lie. I replied, my voice steady and completely void of forgiveness. You and Mom and Dad spent your entire lives pretending to be the elite, looking down on everyone around you, especially me. You thought you could marry a scam artist just because he wore velvet and threw money around. You ignored every red flag because you were so blinded by greed and the desperate need to look wealthy on social media. Well, your fake venture capitalists just mortgaged the family home to pay for this little charade. What are you talking about? Chloe demanded, her voice rising in renewed panic. What mortgage? Asked Dad, I said smoothly. Ask him how he plans to pay back $250,000 when DeAndre goes to federal prison. You wanted a high society lifestyle, Chloe. You wanted the drama and the elite status. Enjoy the fallout. Please, Naomi. Chloe whimpered, her tough facade finally shattering into thousands of tiny, irreparable pieces. I cannot go back out there. Everyone is laughing at me. The caterers took all the food. The florist took my bridal bouquet right out of my hands. My sorority sisters are recording videos on their phones and whispering about me. Please just pay the venue fee. I will do anything you want. I will apologize for the car. I will publicly apologize for everything. Just save me from this humiliation. I stared at the grand estate, feeling an overwhelming sense of vindication wash over me. You cannot afford my forgiveness, Chloe, and I cannot afford to care about your tears anymore. Before she could formulate another desperate weeping plea, a loud, authoritative sound echoed through the phone speaker. It was the sharp, heavy sound of someone knocking aggressively on a thick wooden door. Who is it out there? Chloe cried out, pulling the phone slightly away from her mouth. I smiled deeply into the quiet darkness of my car, knowing exactly who was standing on the other side of that door. Miss Jefferson, a stern professional male voice called out from the hallway. It was actually the estate manager. I need you to open this door immediately. I have the final invoice right here on my clipboard, and I am flanked by private security. We need you to completely vacate the bridal suite right now. I listened through the phone as Chloe gasped, the sound of the heavy wooden door rattling under the authoritative knocks of the estate manager. I did not hang up. I wanted to hear every single miserable second of this confrontation. Chloe fumbled with the lock, her breath hitching in her throat as she pulled the heavy mahogany door inward. The estate manager stepped into the lavishly decorated bridal suite, his posture rigid and uncompromising. He was not alone. Two massive private security guards flanked him, their arms crossed over their broad chests, projecting an unmistakable aura of absolute zero tolerance. DeAndre, who had apparently slipped into the bridal suite to escape the angry vendors swarming the main ballroom, immediately stepped in front of Chloe. He puffed out his chest desperately, attempting to salvage his crumbling alpha male facade. What is the meaning of this? DeAndre demanded, his voice thick with manufactured outrage. You cannot barge into a private bridal suite like this. My fiancé is extremely distressed. I demand you leave this room immediately, or I will have your job by tomorrow morning. The estate manager did not flinch. He did not step back, nor did he offer the customary polite apologies usually reserved for high-paying clients. Instead, he smoothly lifted his heavy clipboard, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he looked DeAndre squarely in the eye. I am afraid your demands carry absolutely no weight here, sir, the estate manager replied, his tone chillingly polite. As of last month, the Monarch estate was officially acquired by a private equity firm. Under the strict directives of our new ownership, we no longer offer grace periods. We do not accept personal checks, and we certainly do not accept credit cards that repeatedly decline for insufficient funds. Our policy is clear and non-negotiable. We require an immediate wire transfer for the outstanding balance of $50,000. If that full amount is not deposited into our corporate account within the next 10 minutes, my security team will physically escort you, your bridal party, and every single one of your guests off the premises. Chloe let out a high-pitched sob, dropping her phone onto the plush carpet. I could still hear everything perfectly. The phone had landed face up, capturing the crisp, humiliating reality of their downfall. "You cannot do this to us," Chloe cried out, her voice breaking. "We have important people out there. We have local politicians and church leaders. You are ruining the most important day of my life over a stupid banking error." "It is not an error," the estate manager stated firmly. "It is a massive delinquency. And frankly, ma'am, your guest list is not our concern. Our concern is the unpaid invoice currently sitting in my hand." Vivian and Desmond pushed their way into the crowded bridal suite, having fled the disastrous scene in the grand foyer. My mother's face was streaked with ruined makeup, her emerald gown looking suddenly garish and out of place in the tense hostel room. My father, usually so commanding and loud, looked like a deflated balloon. But seeing the estate manager threatening his golden child seemed to spark a final desperate surge of arrogant energy within him. "Now see here," Desmond barked, stepping up beside DeAndre to present a unified front of fake authority. "I am a highly respected elder in the community. You cannot treat my family like common criminals. We have hosted countless events in this city. You will give us an extension until Monday morning, and I will personally ensure the funds are delivered." The estate manager slowly shook his head, a gesture of absolute finality. "I am not authorized to grant extensions, sir. And even if I were, I would not extend credit to a groom whose accounts have been flagged for severe federal fraud. We have already been contacted by the authorities regarding Mr. Sterling's financial status." DeAndre's eyes widened, a flash of genuine panic breaking through his arrogant mask. He quickly tried to pivot, resorting to the ultimate bluff of a cornered con artist. He straightened his velvet tuxedo jacket, forcing a loud, condescending laugh that echoed awkwardly in the tense room. "This is completely absurd," DeAndre scoffed, waving his hand dismissively at the manager. "You are making a monumental career mistake, buddy. You say a private equity firm bought this place. Well, I am a highly connected venture capitalist. I play golf with the elite board of directors who run the top firms in this city. I personally know the owners of the firm that bought this estate. When I call them and tell them how you are treating me, you and your little security guards will be standing in the unemployment line by noon tomorrow. I suggest you back down right now before I make a phone call that ruins your entire life." The silence that followed DeAndre's threat was heavy and absolute. I sat in my car across the street, gripping my steering wheel, a wide, triumphant smile spreading across my face. I waited for the manager's response, knowing exactly what he was going to say. I had personally authorized him to deliver this specific message. The estate manager let out a soft, highly amused chuckle. He lowered his clipboard, looking at DeAndre with an expression of pure, unadulterated pity mingled with deep professional satisfaction. "That is a fascinating claim," Mr. Sterling, the manager, said, a cold smirk playing on his lips. "You claim to be close personal friends with the owners of our parent company. You claim you play golf with them." "I absolutely do," DeAndre lied smoothly, doubling down on his desperate fabrication. "So I strongly suggest you rethink your current aggressive tone." The manager's smirk widened into a full predatory smile. "Well, sir, that is incredibly interesting, because the sole owner of the private equity firm that purchased the Monarch estate does not play golf. And she certainly does not associate with men whose credit cards bounce. In fact, if you would like to discuss your unpaid invoice with her directly, you are more than welcome to do so. The owner is actually on the premises tonight." A collective gasp echoed through the bridal suite. Even through the phone speaker, I could hear the sharp intake of breath from my mother, Vivian. The revelation that the mysterious, incredibly wealthy owner of the estate was currently walking among them sent a sudden electric jolt of desperate hope through my parents. Their brains, entirely wired for social climbing and elite networking, instantly began calculating a way out of their disastrous predicament. "Wait!" Vivian gasped, her voice trembling with sudden excitement. "The owner is here tonight at our wedding." "Yes, ma'am," the estate manager replied. "She arrived a short while ago and has been observing the situation very closely." Desmond's eyes lit up with arrogant, delusional confidence. He clapped his hands together, completely ignoring the fact that DeAndre had just been exposed as a massive fraud. In Desmond's mind, this was a golden opportunity to utilize his church connections and his status as a community leader to charm a wealthy benefactor into saving his family reputation. "Vivian, fix your makeup," Desmond commanded, his voice returning to its usual booming authority. "This changes everything. The owner must be one of the elite investors from our congregation. Or perhaps she is a member of the local political coalition we supported last year. These high society types always look out for each other. We just need to find her, explain the situation, and network our way out of this misunderstanding. She will definitely grant us an extension once she realizes who we are and who we represent in the community. Chloe sniffled, wiping her eyes carefully to avoid ruining her expensive bridal makeup. Do you really think she will help us, Dad? What if she refuses? What if she kicks us out anyway? Do not be ridiculous, Chloe. Vivian snapped hastily, smoothing down the sequins on her emerald dress and checking her reflection in the large vanity mirror. We are the Jeffersons. We have immense social capital in this city. Wealthy people respect other wealthy people. We just need to go out there, shake her hand, and charm her. We will invite her to sit at the head table with the senator. We will make her the guest of honor. She will be so incredibly flattered by our hospitality that she will waive the venue fee entirely. This is just a minor networking hurdle. We can easily smooth this over. I sat in my car listening to their absolute delusion and shaking my head. Mr. Manager, Desmond said smoothly, "We are going to step out into the main lobby and speak directly with your boss. We will handle this peer-to-peer now." The estate manager stepped aside, gesturing politely toward the open doorway. "By all means, sir. Please feel free to step out." Desmond adjusted his tie, puffing out his chest with an air of unearned authority, and strode out of the bridal suite. Vivian followed closely behind her heels, clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. Chloe and DeAndre trailed them, looking like nervous children hiding behind their parents. They marched down the grand hallway and stepped out into the massive, glittering expanse of the main foyer. I had timed my entrance perfectly. I pushed open the towering glass front doors of the Monarch estate just as my family emerged from the corridor. The cool evening breeze swept in with me, rustling the heavy silk curtains. I stood in the center of the foyer, my arms crossed, watching them approach. Desmond stopped dead in his tracks. The confident, networking smile he had prepared for the mysterious, wealthy owner instantly vanished. His face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Vivian gasped, grabbing Desmond by the arm, her eyes darting frantically around the lobby as if expecting the elite church members to witness this supposed humiliation. Naomi, Desmond roared, his booming voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "What in the world are you doing back inside this building? I gave you a direct order to leave this property. You are trespassing." Vivian marched forward, pointing a manicured finger directly at my face. "How did you sneak past security? You malicious, vindictive little girl. Are you here to gloat? Are you here to watch your sister cry? I knew you were jealous, but breaking into a private venue to stalk us is a new low even for you. Get out right now before I personally call the police and have you arrested for trespassing." Chloe peeked out from behind our father, her eyes red and puffy, the heavy bridal makeup smeared across her cheeks. "Make her leave, Dad," she whined, her voice trembling with misplaced entitlement. "She is the one who caused all of this bad energy. She probably paid the caterers to leave just to ruin my perfect day." I did not move a single inch. I simply stared at them, absorbing the sheer blinding audacity of their accusations. They were standing in the middle of a collapsing Ponzi scheme, their financial futures completely destroyed by the man standing right next to them, and yet their first instinct was still to blame me for their misery. They were so deeply entrenched in their own delusions that they could not see the massive wrecking ball swinging straight toward their heads. The estate manager stepped smoothly out from the hallway, his heavy clipboard still firmly in hand. He walked past my furious parents, bypassed DeAndre, and came to a stop directly at my right side. He turned to face my father, his expression completely devoid of any customer service warmth. "Mr. and Mrs. Jefferson," the estate manager said, his voice ringing with absolute chilling authority, "I strongly suggest you lower your voices and speak respectfully to the Chief Executive Officer of Apex Holdings, the legal registered owner of this entire property." The silence that slammed into the grand foyer was deafening. It was not just a pause. It was a complete atmospheric vacuum. All the air was violently sucked out of the room. Desmond's mouth hung open, his jaw practically hitting his bow tie. Vivian lowered her pointing finger slowly, her hand shaking so violently that her diamond bracelets rattled against each other. Chloe stopped crying, her tear-stained face freezing into an expression of profound, uncomprehending shock. "What did you just say?" Desmond whispered, the booming authority entirely stripped from his voice. "The owner, Naomi. He said exactly what you heard, Dad," I replied, my voice smooth, steady, and echoing with absolute power. "I am the owner of the Monarch estate. I am not a low-level paper-pushing accountant. I never was. I am a senior partner and the founder of a private equity firm that specializes in acquiring distressed, mismanaged luxury properties. This beautiful historic venue went bankrupt 30 days ago due to terrible financial mismanagement. I bought the entire estate in cash 3 weeks ago." I took a slow, deliberate step forward, my heels echoing sharply on the marble. I watched my mother physically shrink back, her eyes wide with a terror she had never experienced before. "You spent my entire adult life calling me a disappointment." I continued, staring directly into Vivian, horrified eyes. "You told your high society church friends that I was just a corporate drone. You told Chloe that my introverted nature made me socially unfit for your elite circles. You thought I was sitting in a cubicle crunching numbers for a meager paycheck while you paraded around Atlanta pretending to be royalty. You stole my college tuition to pay for Chloe's sorority dues because you thought my future was not worth investing in. You demanded I use the back door tonight because my presence embarrassed you." I let the words hang in the air, watching the devastating reality crush them. "But while you were busy taking out fraudulent second mortgages to fund fake venture capitalist lifestyles," I said, shifting my gaze to my father, "I was busy building a legitimate empire. I do not just attend the elite parties in this city, Dad. I own the buildings where the parties are hosted. I own the ground you are currently standing on." Desmond looked like he was going to pass out. He reached out and grabbed a marble pillar to steady himself. His chest heaved as he struggled to process the monumental shift in power. The daughter he had spent 30 years belittling, the daughter he had just ordered to leave the premises, was the very billionaire he had planned to network with and beg for mercy. "Naomi," Vivian gasped, her voice trembling so badly it was barely recognizable. "You bought this place, you have millions of dollars. Why did you never tell us we are your family?" "Because you would have bled me dry," I answered instantly, offering no comfort, no warmth. "You would have used my money to fund Chloe designer wardrobe. You would have used my success to brag to your country club friends, while still treating me like absolute garbage behind closed doors. You only love people you can use, so I made sure you could never use me." Chloe let out a sudden, frantic gasp. She rushed forward, grabbing DeAndre by the arm and dragging him toward me. The reality of the situation had finally pierced through her thick skull. She realized that the magical, wealthy savior she desperately needed was standing right in front of her. "Naomi," Chloe cried out, her voice pitching up into a desperate, pleading tone. "If you own the venue, then you can fix everything. You can stop the vendors from leaving. You can pay the $50,000 balance. We are sisters. You cannot let them ruin my wedding. You have the power to save my perfect day." I looked at Chloe, marveling at her endless reservoir of entitlement. She had literally just accused me of hacking her groom bank accounts and threatened to destroy my professional reputation on social media. Now she expected me to open my wallet and fund her extravagant delusion. Before I could respond, DeAndre stepped forward. The absolute panic he had displayed in the bridal suite was suddenly tucked away, replaced by a sickening, greasy charm. He actually had the audacity to smile at me, flashing his perfectly whitened teeth as he ran a hand over his velvet lapel. He thought he could pivot. He thought he could manipulate me just like he manipulated my gullible parents. "Well, I have to admit, you completely fooled me," DeAndre said, letting out a smooth, practiced chuckle. "A private equity CEO. That is incredibly impressive, Naomi. I always knew you were hiding a brilliant business mind behind that quiet exterior. Look, we clearly got off on the wrong foot tonight. Emotions are running high and the bank is being completely unreasonable with my corporate accounts. But since you own the place, we can easily resolve this little misunderstanding." He took another step closer, spreading his arms in a gesture of fake familial warmth. "Come on, sis. Since you hold the deed to the property, just comp the wedding for family. Tell your manager here to waive the remaining invoice, let the caterers back in, and we can all get back to celebrating. I promise you, once my offshore funds clear on Monday, I will make this up to you." I will even introduce you to some of my top-tier investors. We can collaborate on some massive real estate projects. Keep it all in the family, right? The sheer, unadulterated gall of this man was almost breathtaking. He had stolen my parents' financial security, lied to my sister, and was actively being hunted by federal authorities, yet he still believed he could charm his way out of a corner. He thought I was just a naive woman with a checkbook. I did not smile. I did not laugh. I simply maintained my cold, unrelenting stare until his greasy smile began to falter and crack at the edges. Keep it in the family, I repeated, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register. You really think you are in a position to negotiate partnerships with me? DeAndre? I reached into my designer leather tote bag and pulled out a thick, heavy stack of documents bound together by a sturdy metal clip. I held the paperwork up, letting the bright chandelier light catch the official federal seals printed on the front pages. I am not going to comp your wedding, I said, looking directly into his rapidly paling face. But I am going to give you a gift. A very special, highly detailed wedding gift. DeAndre's eyes locked onto the documents, his chest freezing mid-breath, as the reality of his impending destruction finally dawned on him. I took a hesitant step backward, the fake charm dissolving completely into raw, animalistic fear. I stepped forward, closing the distance, ensuring that my parents, my sister, and the fraudulent groom could all see exactly what was written on the first page. The time for secrets was over. The time for absolute ruin had arrived. I held the documents out, my gaze steady. Let us take a look at your real portfolio, shall we? I tossed the heavy stack of federal documents onto the sleek marble console table positioned perfectly between us. The loud smack of the thick paper hitting the stone echoed sharply through the grand foyer. DeAndre flinched, as if the sound itself had physically struck him. I reached out and casually flipped open the first page. The bold black ink of a federal indictment warrant stared right back at him. You present yourself as the managing partner of a prestigious venture capital firm. I began, my voice carrying cleanly across the vast open space. You sold my parents on this magnificent illusion of generational wealth. You attended their exclusive church galas, shaking hands with affluent Black families, promising them unprecedented returns on their investments. But there is no venture capital firm. You do not invest in emerging tech startups or luxury real estate. You run a low-level, utterly pathetic Ponzi scheme. You take money from naive, status-obsessed families and use it to pay off the previous investors, skimming the top to fund your velvet tuxedos and expensive cologne. DeAndre swallowed hard, his Adam apple bobbing visibly above his tight collar. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but the slick, arrogant words he usually relied on completely failed to materialize. His carefully constructed mask was disintegrating right in front of my eyes. That is a complete lie, Chloe shrieked, breaking the momentary silence. She lunged forward, grabbing the edge of the marble table as if she wanted to flip it over. DeAndre is a millionaire. He showed Dad his bank statements. He took us on a private jet to Miami last month. You are just making this up to ruin my wedding. You printed these fake papers off the internet because you are a jealous, bitter spinster. I turned my gaze to my sister, feeling absolutely no pity for the panic twisting her features. I pointed directly at her left hand where she was white-knuckling the edge of the table. Are you talking about the man who bought you that massive, dazzling 3-carat diamond ring you have been shoving in my face all year? I asked, stepping closer to her. Let me clarify something for you, Chloe. That ring is not a flawless custom-cut diamond from a high-end boutique in Paris. It is a lab-grown moissanite. He bought it from a discount online retailer for exactly $200. It is a piece of shiny glass. Just like your entire relationship, it is completely fake. Chloe gasped, ripping her hand away from the table and clutching it against her chest, as if the ring had suddenly caught fire. She stared down at the sparkling stone, her chest heaving with rapid, shallow breaths. She looked at DeAndre desperately, silently begging him to deny my claims. DeAndre looked away, unable to meet her eyes. And as for the private jet and the luxury cars parked outside, I continued shifting my attention to my father. Desmond was standing rigidly, his face a terrifying shade of gray. You might want to pay close attention to this part, Dad. DeAndre did not lease those custom sports cars using his own pristine credit. He could not even pass a basic background check for a rental apartment. He leased those cars using your forged signature. Desmond stumbled backward, bumping hard against my mother. What he choked out his voice a hoarse, ragged whisper. My signature. Yes, your signature, I confirmed mercilessly. He stole your identity, Dad. He used the financial information you so willingly handed over when you decided to aggressively invest in his fake company. He took out a massive second mortgage on the house I grew up in. The family home you and Mom boast about at every single church function is currently sitting on the brink of foreclosure. The bank is preparing to seize it because DeAndre took $250,000 of your equity and blew it on fake luxury items to impress your equally fake friends. The air in the foyer turned incredibly toxic. My parents were finally beginning to grasp the sheer magnitude of their impending financial ruin. They had blindly trusted a charismatic con artist simply because he looked the part, entirely disregarding my warnings, because my introverted, cautious nature did not fit their glamorous aesthetic. This cannot be happening, Vivian muttered, her voice trembling violently. She shook her head back and forth, her elaborate hairstyle shifting out of place. This is a trick. This is one of your malicious tricks, Naomi. You have always hated us. You have always hated seeing your sister succeed where you failed. My mother's sudden pivot back to blaming me was almost poetic in its predictability. Instead of holding the criminal standing right next to her, accountable, her broken status-obsessed mind defaulted to attacking the daughter she had always scapegoated. Vivian lunged forward with a sudden vicious burst of energy. She slapped her hand down hard against the marble table, violently knocking the stack of federal documents onto the floor. The papers scattered wildly across the polished tile, federal seals and bank statements sliding toward DeAndre's expensive leather shoes. You are purely evil! Vivian shrieked, her face contorting with an ugly, visceral rage. You are a wicked, miserable woman. You could not stand to see a successful black man entering our family. You could not stand to see Chloe marrying into elite wealth while you remain entirely unloved. You printed these lies because you want to destroy everything we have built. You are trying to tear down a black man's success just to satisfy your own twisted, jealous ego. Her weaponization of race and social solidarity was deeply disgusting. She was attempting to shield a predator by hiding behind the rhetoric of community uplift. She preferred to protect a scam artist over acknowledging the truth that her own daughter was a self-made millionaire attempting to expose a crime. A successful black man. I repeated, my tone dropping to a dead, emotionless flatline. Mom, the man you are defending has systematically defrauded 6 elderly couples in your very own church congregation. He targeted affluent black families specifically because he knew people like you value the appearance of wealth far more than actual financial literacy. He used your own community against you. He is not a success story. He is a parasite. And you eagerly invited him right into your home. Chloe fell to her knees on the marble floor. She began frantically gathering the scattered papers, her perfectly manicured nails scraping against the cold tile. She shoved the documents toward DeAndre, her voice cracking with raw hysteria. Tell her she is lying, DeAndre. Chloe demanded, tears finally spilling over her dark lashes and ruining her flawless makeup. Tell her the ring is real. Tell my dad you did not forge his signature. Please just tell them you have the money. We are supposed to be boarding a flight to the Maldives tomorrow morning. We are supposed to be moving into the Buckhead mansion. Tell them. DeAndre stood completely paralyzed. The charismatic, fast-talking venture capitalist was entirely gone. He looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting toward the heavy glass front doors of the estate, clearly calculating his chances of making a successful run for his rented sports car. But the 2 massive private security guards standing next to the estate manager shifted their weight, subtly blocking his only immediate path of escape. He cannot tell you that, Chloe, I said softly, looking down at my weeping sister. Because he does not have a single dime to his name. And you are not going to the Maldives tomorrow. You are going to be sitting in a police station, explaining how your beloved fiancé managed to steal our parents' retirement fund. Desmond let out a low, guttural groan. He grabbed his chest, his face contorting in genuine agony as the reality of his financial destruction settled deep into his bones. His precious social standing, the decades he spent building his reputation as a pillar of the Atlanta elite, was evaporating into thin air. He had traded his genuine daughter for a shiny, empty illusion, and now he was going to pay the ultimate price. "This cannot be happening today," Vivian wailed, pulling at the expensive fabric of her emerald dress. "The guests are inside. The senator is sitting at table 1. Pastor Williams is waiting to bless the food. We cannot let them know about this. We have to keep this quiet. Naomi, you have to keep this quiet. We will handle DeAndre later. Just pay the venue fee so we can get through the reception tonight." I stared at my mother, completely astounded by her unwavering commitment to the facade. Even now, facing federal fraud, forged mortgages, and absolute bankruptcy, her primary concern was ensuring the high society guests inside the ballroom got their free dinner and drinks. She wanted me to finance the continuation of a lie, just to save her from immediate social embarrassment. "You really think the party is still going to happen?" I asked, my voice laced with a cold, dark amusement. "Mom, the party is officially over." I turned my head and caught the eye of the estate manager, who was watching the familial meltdown with grim professional interest. I gave him a single sharp nod. The manager immediately reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small two-way radio. He pressed the button on the side and spoke clearly into the microphone. "Cut the power to the main ballroom sound system. Right now." A few seconds later, the muffled thumping bass of the elegant string quartet and the lively reception music that had been bleeding through the heavy wooden doors abruptly died. The sudden absolute silence that followed was jarring. From inside the grand ballroom, a low collective murmur began to rise. 300 highly influential, wealthy guests were suddenly plunged into an awkward, confusing silence. They had already watched the catering staff confiscate the appetizers. They had watched the floral team aggressively repossess the centerpieces. Now the music had been killed. The illusion was completely dead. The whispers of the elite crowd grew louder, carrying through the thick walls a rising tide of gossip and harsh judgment that my parents could never, ever escape. I looked at my family, offering them a final, chilling smile. "The absolute truth is incredibly loud," I whispered clearly. "And your esteemed guests are waiting." I stepped back, allowing the sheer crushing gravity of my words to fully settle over my parents. The grand foyer of the Monarch estate, usually a place of joyous celebration and elite networking, had suddenly transformed into a cold, unforgiving courtroom. Desmond and Vivian stared at me, their faces completely drained of color, their arrogant postures completely destroyed. The distant, confused murmuring from the main ballroom served as a relentless ticking clock, a constant reminder that their carefully constructed social empire was actively burning to the ground right before their very eyes. They had spent their entire lives treating me like an invisible burden, a dark stain on their meticulously curated public image, and now I was the only person standing between them and absolute humiliating devastation. I slowly turned my attention to the estate manager, who stood by my side with perfect, unwavering professional detachment. His heavy clipboard was securely tucked under his arm, his security guards maintaining their vigilant, unmoving presence. "What is the exact outstanding balance required to keep the ballroom doors open for the remainder of the evening?" I asked, my voice projecting clearly and powerfully across the polished marble floor, ensuring that every single person in the vicinity heard my question. $50,000, ma'am," the estate manager replied instantly, his tone completely devoid of any sympathy, "payable immediately via a direct wire transfer to our corporate holding account. We cannot accept any alternative methods of payment." I nodded slowly, letting that massive number hang heavily in the tense air. I looked back at my father, watching his chest rise and fall in rapid, panicked breaths. "You have exactly 10 minutes, Dad," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a freshly sharpened blade. 10 minutes to transfer $50,000 into the estate corporate account. If that money does not clear by the time the clock runs out, I am executing my legal right as the registered property owner to evict every single person from this venue. The luxury caterers are already gone. The professional florists have stripped the tables and taken their expensive centerpieces. The music is dead. But if you do not pay the fee, Right now, my security team will physically escort your senator, your esteemed pastor, and your 300 elite society guests out of the building and directly onto the front lawn. Desmond stumbled forward, his hands raised in a desperate trembling gesture of absolute surrender. The arrogant, booming patriarch who had ruthlessly ordered me out the back door just an hour ago was completely gone, utterly erased from existence. I was replaced by a terrified, broken man, begging desperately for his social life, his reputation, and his standing in the affluent Atlanta community. "Naomi, please!" Desmond pleaded, his voice cracking with raw, unadulterated desperation. He reached out as if to grab my arm, but quickly thought better of it when my two private security guards subtly shifted their stance, implicitly warning him to maintain his distance. "You cannot do this to your own blood, Naomi. We are your family. We are your parents. We are prominent members of the exact same church congregation. The Lord commands absolute forgiveness. He teaches us to constantly show grace to those who have wronged us in moments of weakness. You have the unprecedented power to show true grace tonight. Do not let wrath and vengeance destroy your eternal soul. You have to save us from this nightmare." I stared blankly at the man who had willingly sacrificed my college education to fund my sister's extravagant sorority lifestyle. I stared at the man who had viciously forced me to take the blame for a terrible drunk driving accident just to save a superficial pageant title for his favorite golden child. I felt absolutely no warmth, no pity, and no obligation to the terrified man standing before me. "The Lord also commands, 'Thou shalt not steal.'" I snapped back, my voice slicing through his hypocritical self-serving religious defense like a razor blade. "But that sacred commandment certainly did not stop you from letting DeAndre forge your legal signature to secretly mortgage my childhood home. It did not stop you from eagerly participating in a massive fraudulent financial lie just to maintain the appearance of extreme wealth. Do not you dare attempt to use religion to shield yourself from the severe consequences of your own bottomless greed. You worshipped status dad. You bowed down daily to the false idol of high society. You prayed at the altar of public perception. Now the service is over and you get to pay the collection plate in full." Vivian let out a loud, miserable, agonizing wail, burying her tear-streaked face in her heavily jeweled hands. The undeniable reality of their total financial and social ruin was finally crushing her spirit. She collapsed against the marble console table, her emerald gown catching on the sharp edges of the expensive stone. She could not formulate a single word of defense, knowing my accusations were entirely factual. Chloe had remained completely frozen near the marble console table, tightly clutching the crumpled federal documents in her trembling hands. Her wide, terrified eyes darted wildly between the damning indictment papers and the man she was supposed to marry. The thick, comforting blanket of denial that had shielded her for months finally shattered, completely breaking into a million jagged pieces. She dropped the papers onto the floor, marching aggressively toward the man who had promised her a sprawling mansion in Buckhead and a life of unparalleled, effortless luxury. "DeAndre!" Chloe screamed, her voice echoing shrilly and painfully off the high vaulted ceilings, her hands balled into tight, trembling fists at her sides, the cheap lab-grown diamond catching the chandelier light. "Tell me she is lying right now. Tell me you actually have the money for this venue. You promised me everything was perfect. You told me the offshore accounts were just pending a standard security review. You told me the private jet was yours. Where is the $50,000? Pay the manager right now and make this horrible nightmare stop." DeAndre backed away quickly, his slick, charming demeanor melting rapidly under the intense pressure of her screaming demands. He bumped clumsily into a towering floral pillar that had not yet been repossessed by the vendors, nearly knocking the heavy structure over. "Chloe, baby, please calm down," he stammered, raising his hands defensively in a pathetic attempt to pacify his furious bride. "We are just hitting a temporary cash flow issue. My top investors are currently restructuring the capital allocation. I just need a few short days to liquidate some heavy assets. I promise I will make this up to you. Just tell your sister to back off and give us some breathing room." "You are totally broke!" Chloe shrieked, launching herself at him and slamming her fists violently against his expensive velvet tuxedo jacket. "You are a complete, disgusting fraud. You do not have a venture capital firm. You bought me a fake, worthless ring. You ruined my beautiful wedding. You ruined my entire life. I hate you. I hate you. DeAndre's desperate, placating expression vanished in a single terrifying instant. The carefully constructed mask of the sophisticated, wealthy gentleman completely peeled away, revealing the violent, unstable, deeply manipulative predator lurking underneath the expensive clothes. He forcefully grabbed Chloe by the wrists, his grip so vicious and tight that she gasped in sudden sharp pain. He violently shoved her backward with a surprising amount of brute force, sending her stumbling dangerously over the heavy, intricate train of her expensive ivory wedding gown. She hit the floor hard, crying out in shock. "Shut your mouth, you stupid, spoiled brat!" DeAndre roared, his voice erupting with a terrifying, explosive rage that none of my family members had ever witnessed before. His face contorted into an ugly, hateful, sneering mask. "You think you are so incredibly elite? You think you are some high society princess who deserves the world handed to her on a silver platter? You and your pathetic, status-obsessed parents were the absolute easiest marks I ever targeted in my entire life. You were all so incredibly desperate to look rich that you practically handed me your bank accounts with a smile. You actively begged me to lie to you. You wanted the fake cars, the fake diamonds, and the fake prestige. Do not stand there crying and acting like a helpless victim when you are just a greedy, shallow, materialistic gold digger." Desmond let out a furious, protective shout, lunging forward to protect his beloved golden child. "Do not you dare put your hands on my daughter," Desmond yelled, raising his fists as he charged at the man who had just stolen his entire financial future. DeAndre easily shoved my father aside, his physical strength completely overpowering the older, out-of-shape man. Desmond crashed hard onto the polished marble floor, his suit jacket ripping along the seam as he slid against the cold stone. Vivian screamed again, rushing to her husband's side, her false composure entirely destroyed. I stood perfectly still, my arms crossed, watching the toxic illusion of their perfect family violently implode in the center of my venue. I did not intervene. I did not call for my security guards to separate them. I simply let the destruction run its natural, devastating course. They had built their entire lives on a foundation of cruel lies, and now the structural integrity was failing spectacularly. DeAndre turned sharply, his chest heaving with exertion, his eyes frantically scanning the grand foyer for the absolute quickest exit. He realized that staying in the building meant facing my private security and the impending wrath of the defrauded guests. He took one fast, desperate step toward the heavy glass front doors, desperate to flee the catastrophic wreckage he had single-handedly created. But before his shiny leather shoe could even touch the welcome mat, a sharp, piercing sound sliced aggressively through the cool, dark night air. The unmistakable, high-pitched wail of approaching police sirens echoed loudly down the long, winding private driveway of the estate. The flashing, frantic reflection of brilliant red and blue emergency lights began to dance wildly across the towering glass doors, illuminating DeAndre's terrified face. The sound of the sirens grew deafeningly loud, vibrating against the thick glass panes of the entrance. DeAndre froze completely, his entire body going rigid, as the inescapable reality of federal prison materialized right outside the venue. He slowly turned his head, locking eyes with me. His gaze was filled with a mixture of absolute hatred and profound disbelief. He finally understood that I had orchestrated every single step of this trap. I had not just completely exposed his massive financial fraud, I had meticulously cornered him in a place where he had absolutely no avenue for escape. The flashing red and blue lights cast long, distorted shadows across the marble floor, painting my family complete and utter devastation in vivid, undeniable colors. I offered him one final, chillingly serene smile as the heavy glass doors were violently pushed open from the outside. The ultimate reckoning had finally arrived at the doorstep, and there was no amount of fake charm or forged signatures that could possibly save him right now. The sharp, terrifying wail of the police sirens sliced through the cool Atlanta night air, growing exponentially louder with every passing second. The flashing, frantic reflection of brilliant red and blue emergency lights bounced aggressively off the towering glass front doors of the Monarch estate. I stood perfectly still, my arms crossed, watching the absolute destruction of my family's fraudulent empire finally unfold. Inside the grand ballroom, The 300 elite society guests had already descended into complete chaos when the music died, but the undeniable sound of approaching police cruisers amplified the panic tenfold. They were not just whispering anymore. They were rushing toward the large windows, their cell phones out eager to witness the highly anticipated downfall of a prominent black family. DeAndre froze completely, his entire body going rigid. The slick, arrogant venture capitalist facade he had maintained for years was entirely stripped away, leaving behind a terrified, cornered criminal. He looked wildly around the grand foyer, his chest heaving with exertion after violently shoving Chloe to the floor. He realized instantly that staying in the building meant facing my private security guards, but stepping outside meant walking directly into the arms of the law. He had no viable options left. "What did you do?" DeAndre screamed, his voice cracking with raw hysteria, as he lunged toward me, completely abandoning any remaining pretense of civility. "You malicious, vindictive woman. You called the cops on me. You are going to ruin everything I built." My two private security guards immediately stepped forward, their massive frames easily blocking DeAndre's path. They did not draw weapons, but their aggressive, imposing stance was more than enough to halt his desperate advance. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I looked him dead in the eye, my voice radiating with cold, unwavering authority. "I did not ruin anything, DeAndre," I stated firmly, ensuring that my parents heard every single word. "You ruined yourself the second you decided to forge my father's signature to steal $250,000 from my family. You thought you could run a massive Ponzi scheme targeting affluent black families and simply walk away with your pockets full. But you made one catastrophic miscalculation. You underestimated me. I forwarded the forged mortgage documents, the fraudulent bank statements, and the irrefutable evidence of your massive wire fraud directly to the FBI and local authorities over an hour ago. They are not here because of a noise complaint. They are here for you." Desmond, who had just managed to pull himself up from the cold marble floor after being violently shoved by the man he had practically worshipped, let out a loud, pathetic groan. He brushed off his torn tuxedo jacket and stumbled toward the heavy glass doors. His desperate, status-obsessed brain still completely unable to process the severe reality of the situation. He genuinely believed he could still talk his way out of a federal crime by utilizing his church connections. Wait, Desmond stammered, raising his hands in a placating gesture as he moved toward the entrance. "I can handle this. I am a highly respected elder in this community. I know the police chief personally. I will just go out there and explain that this is all a massive misunderstanding. We will keep this completely private. We will resolve this internally. We cannot let the senator and the congregation see this scandal unfold. We have to protect the family reputation." I watched in sheer amazement as my father's delusion reached unprecedented new heights. "Dad," I said, my voice sharp enough to slice through glass. "You cannot network your way out of a federal indictment. The police chief is not going to save you from a massive wire fraud investigation. Your precious reputation is already dead." Before Desmond could even reach the heavy glass handles, the doors were violently pushed open from the outside. 4 uniformed Atlanta police officers marched aggressively into the grand foyer, their hands resting firmly on their utility belts. They bypassed my father completely ignoring his frantic attempts to introduce himself and play the respectable community leader card. Their eyes locked instantly onto DeAndre, who was now backing away slowly, his hands raised in a pathetic gesture of surrender. DeAndre Sterling, the lead officer, announced, his voice booming with undeniable authority, completely shattering whatever remaining hope my family clung to. "You are under arrest for suspicion of severe wire fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. Keep your hands where we can see them and step forward immediately." DeAndre let out a high-pitched, desperate noise, shaking his head frantically as 2 officers moved quickly to flank him. "No, wait, you have the wrong guy," DeAndre pleaded, his voice cracking as he desperately tried to maintain his fake persona. "I am a highly successful venture capitalist. I am getting married today. This is just a huge misunderstanding regarding some offshore corporate accounts. I can clear this up in 10 minutes if you just let me make a phone call to my investors." The officers ignored his pathetic lies entirely. They grabbed his arms, spinning him around roughly and slamming him against the marble console table. The heavy metallic click of the handcuffs echoing sharply through the silent foyer was the most satisfying sound I had heard in my entire life. Chloe remained frozen on the floor, her expensive ivory wedding gown pooled around her in a messy, stained heap. She watched in profound, uncomprehending horror as the man who had promised her a life of extreme luxury was aggressively patted down and handcuffed by the police. The fake 3-carat moissanite ring on her finger seemed to mock her, catching the red and blue flashing lights reflecting off the marble walls. She had traded her dignity, her sister, and her future for a cheap, shiny illusion, and now she was watching her entire world violently collapse. Desmond stood completely paralyzed near the entrance, his mouth hanging open in shock. The reality of his impending financial destruction finally overpowered his desperate need for social validation. He had willingly handed over his personal financial information, his home equity, and his pristine credit score to a charismatic con artist, and now he was going to lose absolutely everything. Vivian, however, was not paralyzed by fear. Her broken status-obsessed mind simply bypassed logic completely and defaulted to the only coping mechanism she knew: attacking me. She spun around, her face contorting with a visceral, ugly rage that made her look entirely unrecognizable. She marched toward me, her metallic heels clicking aggressively against the stone floor, pointing a trembling manicured finger directly at my face. "You did this!" Vivian shrieked, her voice echoing shrilly over the sound of the police radios. "You evil, vindictive, jealous little girl. You orchestrated this entire spectacle just to humiliate us in front of the most important people in Atlanta. You called the police to our private event. You ruined your sister's perfect day. You destroyed our family public image. How could you be so incredibly malicious? How could you destroy a successful black man's life just to satisfy your own twisted, bitter ego?" I stared at my mother, completely astounded by her unwavering commitment to the absolute delusion. Even now, watching a federal criminal being hauled out of the building in handcuffs, she preferred to blame me for exposing the crime rather than holding the predator accountable. She cared more about the optics of a ruined wedding than the undeniable fact that her entire financial future had just been stolen by the man she was fiercely defending. "I did not ruin anything, Mom," I replied, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet, icy register. "I simply refused to finance your pathetic, desperate lies anymore. You wanted to play the role of high society royalty, and you were perfectly willing to sacrifice my college education, my credit score, and my basic human dignity to achieve it. You eagerly invited a known predator into your home simply because he drove a leased sports car and wore an expensive velvet tuxedo. You begged him to lie to you, and he happily obliged. I just turned on the lights so everyone could finally see the roaches scattering across the floor." The two police officers grabbed DeAndre by the arms and began forcefully marching him toward the heavy glass doors. The elite guests inside the main ballroom had now completely abandoned their tables, crowding near the entrance of the foyer, their cell phones raised high to record every single humiliating second of the arrest. The pristine, highly curated image of the wealthy, influential Caldwell family was actively being broadcasted live on Instagram, completely obliterating decades of my parents' desperate social climbing. As the officers hauled DeAndre toward the exit, a sleek black SUV abruptly pulled up behind the police cruisers, its tires screeching loudly against the pavement. The back door flew open, and a woman holding a small, crying toddler stepped out into the flashing red and blue lights. She marched aggressively up the front steps, her face twisted with a mixture of profound relief and furious anger. She pointed a shaking finger directly at DeAndre's face as the officers pulled him through the doorway. "That is him!" the woman shouted, her voice cutting clearly through the chaotic noise. "That is the man who stole my entire life savings. He promised to marry me, drained my bank accounts, and abandoned his own child. Lock him up and throw away the key." The collective gasp from the watching guests echoed loudly through the foyer. Chloe buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably as the final devastating piece of the truth completely shattered her fragile, entitled reality. The man she had aggressively flaunted, the man she had used to belittle me, was not just a broke fraud. He was a serial predator who had abandoned a family. I stood perfectly still, my arms crossed, watching the absolute destruction of their toxic empire. The sirens wailed loudly into the night, signaling the end of the line for the golden child and the enablers who had protected her. The chaotic scene in the grand foyer of the monarch estate had officially reached a point of absolute irreversible public ruin. The blinding, frantic flashes of the red and blue police lights continued to illuminate the towering glass doors, casting long, ominous shadows across the polished marble floors. Outside, I watched through the heavy glass as DeAndre was forcefully shoved into the back of a police cruiser, his loud, desperate protests completely muffled by the thick, soundproofed vehicle doors. The woman he had severely defrauded stood nearby, aggressively giving her statement to a second set of officers, while the elite high society guests of the Caldwell family aggressively pressed their faces against the windows to record every single second of the scandalous arrest. Desmond, my father, stood paralyzed near the entrance, his broad shoulders slumped, his custom tuxedo ruined. His precious, meticulously cultivated reputation as a prominent, respected community leader had just been utterly destroyed on live social media. Vivian, however, was not paralyzed. Her brain, fundamentally incapable of processing shame or acknowledging her own severe lack of judgment, immediately shifted gears. She forcefully grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging painfully into my skin through the fabric of my tailored blazer. "Naomi, you have to fix this right now," Vivian demanded, her voice a frantic, hissing whisper as she tried to pull me toward the center of the foyer. "The guests are watching us. The senator is out there. You have to go out there. Take the microphone from the wedding planner and tell everyone that this is just a minor misunderstanding. Tell them DeAndre was just taken in for questioning regarding a small corporate tax issue. Tell them the wedding is just delayed until tomorrow." I forcefully yanked my arm out of her grip, stepping back and staring at her with profound, unadulterated disgust. "Fix this?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "Mom, the man who was about to marry your daughter just got arrested for federal wire fraud and grand larceny. He stole $250,000 from you. He forged Dad's signature to secretly mortgage the house I grew up in. There is absolutely no wedding to delay." Desmond suddenly snapped out of his paralyzed state, marching toward me with a desperate, wild look in his eyes. He pointed a trembling finger at me, his booming voice, attempting to regain some fraction of authority. "Your mother is right, Naomi," Desmond insisted, his chest heaving. "We cannot let the congregation and the elite circles of Atlanta see us fall like this. We will lose our standing in the church. We will be completely ostracized from the country club. You said you are a billionaire, right? You said you own this entire estate and a massive private equity firm. You have to use your wealth to save us." I stared at him, genuinely astounded by the sheer blinding audacity of his demand. "Save you," I repeated, narrowing my eyes. "Yes, save us," Desmond barked, stepping closer. "Call your elite corporate lawyers right now. Have them go down to the precinct and post DeAndre bail immediately. Pay off whatever outstanding debts he owes to that screaming woman outside. Pay off the federal authorities if you have to. If you have millions of dollars, you can easily make this entire scandal disappear. You have to save your sister's dignity. You have to save the family reputation." The absolute silence that followed his demand was thick, heavy, and incredibly toxic. I looked at the man who had spent 30 years treating me like a complete embarrassment. I looked at the woman who had happily allowed my sister to steal my hard-earned accomplishments. They were standing in the middle of a massive financial crater, fully aware that they had been severely conned by a predator, and yet their only concern was what the neighbors might think. They did not care that Chloe was currently sobbing uncontrollably on the floor, her life completely shattered. They did not care that their own retirement fund was entirely gone. They only cared about the illusion. They were entirely, hopelessly irredeemable. They would willingly sacrifice my hard-earned empire, my legal standing, and my personal freedom just to keep up appearances for people who did not even genuinely like them. "Dad," I said, my voice dropping to a chillingly quiet register that echoed loudly in the tense foyer. "You want me to commit severe federal crimes, bribe law enforcement, and spend my own money to bail out a con artist who actively stole from you. You want me to risk my entire professional career just to save you from social embarrassment." "It is your duty as a daughter!" Vivian shrieked, tears of sheer panic streaming down her face. "We gave you life. We raised you. You owe us this protection. If you let this wedding fail, If you let everyone leave here tonight, knowing that we were scammed, I will never ever forgive you. You have never forgiven me for simply existing, Mom. I replied, my voice steady, cold, and entirely devoid of any residual familial obligation. I am not bailing out a federal criminal. I am not paying off his massive debts. And I am certainly not going to stand in front of your fake status-obsessed friends and lie to protect your pathetic ego. Desmond's face turned a terrifying shade of purple. He raised his hand as if he were going to strike me, his religious facade entirely abandoned. If you do not walk into that ballroom and fix this right now, Naomi, you are absolutely dead to us. You are no longer a Caldwell. We will erase you completely. I looked at his raised hand, feeling absolutely no fear, only a profound, clarifying sense of closure. You cannot erase someone who holds the deed to your entire life, Dad, I said smoothly. And as for fixing this, you are right. It is time to address the guests. I turned sharply on my heel, completely ignoring Vivian, frantic screaming protests, and marched directly toward the heavy, intricately carved wooden doors that led into the main grand ballroom. The estate manager, sensing my intention, quickly moved ahead of me, signaling his security team to follow closely. Naomi, stop! Chloe cried out from the floor, her voice cracking as she struggled to untangle herself from her heavy ivory gown. Do not go in there. Do not tell them. Please, I will do anything. I did not stop. The estate manager aggressively pushed open the heavy double doors, and I stepped smoothly into the massive, dimly lit ballroom. The enormous space was filled with over 300 of Atlanta's most affluent, influential, and incredibly judgmental socialites. The sudden cessation of the music and the visible presence of the police outside had created a thick atmosphere of chaotic confusion. The guests were crowded near the large windows, whispering aggressively, pointing their manicured fingers, and openly gossiping about the lack of food, the missing floral arrangements, and the flashing emergency lights. The moment I stepped onto the elevated grand stage at the front of the room, the whispers began to die down. The guests recognized me not as the wealthy owner of the venue, but as the quiet, socially awkward older sister who was rarely invited to exclusive family events. I could see the confusion rippling through the crowd. They were expecting Desmond to emerge and deliver a smooth, charismatic excuse. They were expecting Vivian to offer a polite, elegant apology for the delay. Instead, they got me. I walked directly to the center of the stage, my heels clicking sharply against the polished wood. I grabbed the wireless microphone from the heavy silver stand, my grip firm and confident. I looked out over the sea of expensive suits and designer gowns, making direct eye contact with the prominent local senator, the wealthy church pastor, and the various elite socialites who had spent years looking down on me. Desmond and Vivian rushed through the doors seconds later, stopping dead at the edge of the stage, their faces frozen in absolute horror as they realized they could no longer control the narrative. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice booming clearly and powerfully through the venue's massive state-of-the-art sound system. The acoustics carried my words perfectly to every single corner of the expansive room, ensuring that no one could miss a single syllable. I apologize for the sudden lack of music and the severe disruption to this evening's elegant festivities. I continued, my tone meticulously professional, completely devoid of any familial warmth. I know many of you are prominent members of the community, and you were expecting to celebrate the joyous union of my sister Chloe Caldwell and Mr. DeAndre Sterling. A low, anticipatory murmur rolled through the crowded room. Guests leaned forward, their cell phones raised high, recording the unprecedented spectacle. However, I am speaking to you tonight, not just as the sister of the bride, but as the chief executive officer of Apex Holdings, the firm that legally acquired this property 3 weeks ago, I announced. The collective gasp from the elite crowd was incredibly satisfying. I watched the realization hit them. The quiet sister they had ignored was actually the billionaire owner of the venue. I am officially announcing that this event is immediately and permanently canceled. I stated, my voice echoing like a heavy gavel striking a wooden block. The groom, Mr. DeAndre Sterling, has just been arrested on the premises by federal and local authorities for multiple counts of severe wire fraud, identity theft, and operating a massive financial Ponzi scheme targeting affluent families in this very city. The ballroom erupted. 300 guests gasped, shouted, and began talking over one another in a state of absolute, unadulterated shock. The pristine, flawless reputation of the Caldwell family was officially permanently destroyed. The grand ballroom of the Monarch estate was a masterpiece of classic Southern opulence. Towering crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over the 300 guests, all dressed in their finest tailored suits and stunning evening gowns. These were the elite members of Atlanta's black upper-class prominent pastors, local politicians, successful doctors, and high-level corporate executives. They were the exact demographic DeAndre Sterling had spent months meticulously targeting for his massive financial scam, and they were the very people my parents had sacrificed my entire life and well-being to desperately impress. As I stood on the elevated stage, gripping the microphone tightly, I looked out over the sea of confused, whispering faces. The absence of the string quartet and the heavy, ominous flashing of the police lights visible through the large arched windows had already shattered the celebratory atmosphere. But nothing could possibly prepare them for what I was about to say. Desmond and Vivian stood frozen at the edge of the stage, their faces completely drained of color. They looked like terrified, cornered animals waiting for the executioner to drop the final axe. They had spent decades carefully curating a flawless, highly respectable public image, hiding their deep-seated toxicity and financial irresponsibility behind a pristine facade of religious piety and social grace. Now that entire facade was about to be violently ripped away. "Ladies and gentlemen," I continued, my voice steady, clear, and projecting a chillingly calm authority through the venue's massive speakers. "I know this is a highly unusual disruption to what was supposed to be a joyous occasion. Many of you traveled significant distances to celebrate with the Caldwell and Sterling families tonight. However, as the legal owner of this property, it is my unfortunate duty to inform you that this wedding reception will not be proceeding as planned." A sharp collective gasp rippled through the expansive room. Several guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, exchanging alarmed, wide-eyed glances with their table mates. I could see the prominent senator leaning over to whisper something urgently to his wife. Pastor Williams, the head of my parents' massive congregation, sat rigid in his chair, his brow furrowed in deep, troubled confusion. "Mr. DeAndre Sterling, the man who was meant to stand at the altar tomorrow morning, is currently in the custody of the Atlanta Police Department and federal authorities," I announced, ensuring every single syllable was perfectly articulated. "He has been arrested on the premises for operating a highly sophisticated multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme. He has been systematically defrauding affluent families within this very community, utilizing forged documents, fake corporate accounts, and stolen identities to fund a completely fabricated lifestyle." The ballroom exploded into absolute, uncontrollable chaos. The polite, hushed murmurs instantly transformed into loud, angry shouts of disbelief and profound shock. 300 high society guests began talking over one another, the noise echoing deafeningly off the high vaulted ceilings. I watched as several affluent older couples, people I knew for a fact DeAndre had actively been courting for his fake venture capital firm, stood up abruptly, their faces twisting with a mixture of sheer panic and deep visceral outrage. Vivian let out a loud, pathetic sob, burying her face in her hands. She physically crumpled against Desmond, unable to bear the heavy, crushing weight of the public humiliation. She knew that every single person in that room was currently realizing that the Caldwell family had been thoroughly, embarrassingly conned. She knew that her elite friends were actively judging her for bringing a dangerous, manipulative predator into their sacred social circle. Desmond looked absolutely destroyed. His broad shoulders slumped heavily, his arrogant posture completely shattered. He stared blankly at the floor, totally unable to meet the harsh, questioning gazes of the prominent church elders, who were now openly staring at him from their VIP tables. He had traded his genuine daughter for a shiny, empty illusion, and now the entire city was watching him pay the ultimate, devastating price. I raised my free hand, gesturing for the crowd to settle down. The chaotic noise slowly receded, replaced by a tense, suffocating silence as the guests waited eagerly for the rest of the scandalous details. As the CEO of Apex Holdings, I hold a strict zero-tolerance policy, regarding illegal activities and fraudulent behavior on any of our commercial properties, I stated firmly. Furthermore, due to severe ongoing financial delinquencies regarding the massive outstanding balance for tonight's event, the original rental contract for the Monarch estate has been officially voided. Therefore, I must respectfully ask that everyone please gather your belongings and begin making your way toward the exits. The event is permanently canceled. A tall, distinguished-looking man in the front row stood up. It was Dr. Harrison, a wealthy surgeon and a close personal friend of my parents. He looked directly at Desmond, his expression hardened with deep suspicion and profound disappointment. Desmond, Dr. Harrison called out, his voice cutting clearly through the tense atmosphere. Is this true? Did you bring a federal criminal into our church? Did he have access to our financial portfolios? Did you vouch for a man who was actively trying to steal our retirement funds? Desmond opened his mouth, but no words came out. His throat worked convulsively, his eyes darting frantically around the room, desperately searching for a single friendly face. He found none. The people he had spent decades trying to impress were now looking at him like he was a highly contagious, deeply toxic disease. They realized that his desperate, pathetic obsession with maintaining a wealthy appearance had actively endangered their own financial security. I did not know, Desmond finally choked out, his voice, weak, ragged, and entirely pathetic. I swear to you, I had absolutely no idea. He showed me bank statements. He showed me corporate portfolios. I thought he was a successful, legitimate businessman. I thought he was going to take care of my daughter. You thought he was going to elevate your social status, I corrected sharply, my voice booming through the microphone, completely cutting off his pathetic excuses. You did not care about his actual character, Dad. You only cared about his leased luxury cars and his expensive velvet tuxedos. You cared so much about the glamorous illusion that you willingly allowed him to secretly forge your legal signature and mortgage the house I grew up in. You handed him the keys to your financial ruin with a massive, eager smile simply because he looked the part. The collective gasp from the elite crowd was even louder this time. The revelation that Desmond had been foolish enough to let a con artist mortgage his family home completely sealed his social destruction. In the ruthless, highly judgmental world of Atlanta's upper class, being a victim of fraud was embarrassing, but being a willing, gullible participant due to sheer vanity was an absolutely unforgivable career-ending sin. Vivian suddenly ripped her hands away from her face, her eyes wild and furious. She pointed a shaking manicured finger up at me on the stage, completely abandoning any remaining pretense of elegance or grace. "Stop it!" Vivian shrieked, her voice echoing shrilly through the silent ballroom. "Stop humiliating us! You planned this! You planned this entire spectacle just to destroy us! You are a wicked, jealous, miserable woman. You could not stand to see Chloe happy, so you ruined her life. You ruined everything." I stared down at my mother, feeling absolutely no anger, no sadness, and no pity. I felt nothing but a profound, clarifying sense of total liberation. She was finally exposing her true, incredibly toxic nature to the exact people she had spent her entire life trying to impress. She was showing the entire congregation the cruel, vicious woman she had always been behind closed doors. "I did not ruin anything, Mom," I replied calmly, my voice steady and resolute. "I simply refuse to finance your pathetic, desperate lies anymore. You built an entire life on a foundation of cruel, shallow illusions, and now you are angry because the structural integrity finally failed. I am not the villain here. I am just the person who finally turned on the lights." I lowered the microphone, turning it off with a sharp, decisive click. I placed it gently on the small table next to the podium and walked smoothly down the steps of the stage. The guests parted for me immediately, creating a wide, clear path as I made my way toward the heavy double doors. They looked at me with a mixture of profound shock, deep respect, and lingering fear. They finally understood that the quiet, introverted sister they had constantly overlooked was actually the most powerful person in the room. As I reached the exit, I signaled to the estate manager, who was waiting efficiently by the doorway. "Please ensure that all guests receive a complimentary box of the catered food on their way out," I instructed clearly. "I do not want anything to go to waste. And please have security lock the gates as soon as the premises are fully vacated." The estate manager nodded respectfully. "Understood, Ms. Caldwell. We will handle the evacuation immediately." I walked out of the grand ballroom and back into the cool marble foyer. The flashing police lights were finally gone, the cruisers having departed with DeAndre securely in the back seat. The massive, heavy silence of the empty hall was a stark, beautiful contrast to the chaotic, screaming reality I had just left behind. I had successfully executed the ultimate devastating payback, not through malicious revenge, but through the simple, undeniable power of absolute truth. My parents' fake empire was completely dead, and my real one was just beginning. The massive, incredibly opulent grand ballroom of the Monarch estate, which just moments ago had been packed tightly with the most elite high society figures in all of Atlanta, was now completely devastatingly empty. The rapid, frantic exodus of the 300 affluent guests had left behind an eerie, suffocating silence. Chairs were aggressively pushed back, half-empty champagne glasses littered the expensive silk-draped tables, and the faint, lingering smell of expensive designer perfume hung heavily in the stale air. In the absolute dead center of the vast abandoned room sat the towering seven-tier wedding cake. It was a masterpiece of sugary perfection, adorned with cascading sugar roses and intricate gold leaf detailing. It stood perfectly untouched, a ridiculous towering monument to a fraudulent marriage that would now never ever take place. Desmond and Vivian were slouched miserably in two chairs near the front of the stage, their faces buried deeply in their hands. They looked like the sole survivors of a catastrophic, life-altering natural disaster. The reality of their total financial ruin and their absolute permanent social destruction had finally crushed the very last ounce of arrogant defiance out of them. They were utterly broken, completely paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of their own shallow status-obsessed mistakes. Chloe, however, was not paralyzed. The terrifying, undeniable reality of her situation had just violently crashed down upon her. She was not going to be the wealthy, glamorous Mrs. DeAndre Sterling. She was not going to be moving into a sprawling multi-million-dollar mansion in Buckhead. She was not going to be flying on private jets to the Maldives. She was completely broke, utterly humiliated, and entirely alone. Chloe let out a loud, agonizing wail that echoed shrilly off the high, vaulted ceilings of the empty ballroom. She forcefully ripped the heavy diamond-encrusted tiara out of her meticulously styled hair, throwing it aggressively across the polished wooden floor. It shattered against the base of the massive wedding cake, sending cheap fake rhinestones scattering everywhere. She stumbled forward, her heavy, incredibly expensive ivory designer gown dragging awkwardly behind her. She moved frantically toward the edge of the stage where I was standing, her face twisted with a mixture of sheer panic, profound desperation, and raw, unfiltered terror. She did not stop at the edge of the stage. Chloe, the former HBCU pageant queen, the golden child who had spent her entire life looking down on me, aggressively threw herself forward, collapsing violently onto her knees, right at the toes of my sleek black designer heels. The heavy layers of tulle and silk pooled messily around her as she grabbed the fabric of my tailored trousers with both of her trembling hands. "Naomi, please," Chloe sobbed hysterically. Her carefully applied makeup completely ruined, dark streaks of mascara running down her flushed cheeks. "Please, you have to help me. You cannot just leave me like this. You have to take me in." I looked down at her, feeling absolutely no urge to reach out to comfort her or to pull her up from the floor. I stood perfectly still, my posture rigid, watching the golden child finally experience the harsh, unforgiving consequences of her own cruel, shallow actions. "Help you?" I asked, my voice deadly calm and entirely devoid of any residual sisterly warmth. "Why on earth would I help you, Chloe? You made it abundantly clear exactly an hour ago that I was a dark stain on your pristine reputation. You told me to my face that I was completely socially unfit to even stand in the same room as your elite wealthy friends." "I was wrong," Chloe wailed, tightening her desperate, painful grip on my trousers. "I was so wrong, Naomi. He lied to me. DeAndre lied about absolutely everything. He told me he was a millionaire. He told me he had massive offshore accounts, but I have nothing. I maxed out all of my own personal credit cards to buy my wedding dress. I quit my job at the boutique because he told me I would never have to work again. I do not even have an apartment anymore because my lease ended yesterday." She paused, taking a ragged, shuddering breath, her eyes wide and wild with genuine, profound panic. "And Naomi, I am pregnant. I am 2 months pregnant with his child. You cannot let me be homeless. You are my big sister. You have millions of dollars. You have a massive company. You have to let me move into one of your houses. You have to protect me." The revelation of her pregnancy hung heavily in the stale air of the empty ballroom. Desmond and Vivian, who had been listening miserably from their chairs, let out fresh, agonizing groans of pure despair. The absolute disaster had just compounded. Their golden child was not just socially ruined and broke. She was now permanently tied to a convicted federal felon. I stared down at the desperate weeping woman clinging to my legs. The sheer blinding audacity of her request was truly breathtaking. She had actively participated in my emotional abuse for decades. She had happily allowed our parents to drain my college fund to support her glamorous lifestyle. She had mocked my career, my appearance, and my introverted nature. And now, the very second her fraudulent, shiny world collapsed, she expected me to instantly transform back into her reliable, silent, completely accommodating safety net. I slowly reached down and firmly, forcefully peeled her trembling hands off my trousers. I took a deliberate step backward, creating a clear, unmistakable physical boundary between us. "You forgot to invite me to your life, Chloe," I stated, my voice dropping to a chillingly cold, completely emotionless register. "You forgot to invite me to your engagement party. You forgot to invite me to your bridal shower. You literally instructed security to aggressively throw me out the back door of your wedding venue because my corporate aesthetic offended you." I reached into the inner pocket of my tailored blazer. I pulled out the crisp white envelope containing the $10,000 gift check. It was the exact same envelope that Vivian had viciously snatched out of my hand in the foyer earlier that evening, before the police arrived, before the truth came out. "You completely erased me when you thought you were ascending to the top of the elite Atlanta social ladder." I continued, holding the envelope up so she could see it clearly. "You only remembered my phone number when your fake billionaire fiancé needed a quick bailout. You only remembered that I was your sister when you realized I was the only person left in this city who actually has real money." Chloe stared at the envelope, her eyes wide, desperate tears continuing to stream down her ruined face. "Naomi, please," she begged, her voice a pathetic, ragged whisper. "So I am sorry, Chloe," I said, my tone absolutely final, completely severing the very last invisible string of our toxic familial bond. "Since you forgot to invite me to your life, I seem to have completely forgotten how to be your safety net." I firmly grasped the envelope with both hands. I did not hesitate. I ripped the thick paper straight down the middle. Chloe let out a sharp, devastated gasp. I put the two halves together and ripped them again, tearing the $10,000 check into tiny, completely worthless, jagged pieces. I opened my hands and simply let the shredded paper fall. The pieces fluttered down like bitter, expensive snow, landing softly in the messy folds of her heavy, ruined designer wedding gown. "You wanted to live in a world of high society illusions, Chloe," I said, looking down at the shredded check resting on her lap. "Welcome to the real world. In the real world, you actually have to pay for your own mistakes." Chloe collapsed forward, burying her face in her arms, her loud, agonizing sobs echoing miserably through the empty venue. I did not look at her again. I turned my attention to the front row where Desmond and Vivian were still slouched in their chairs, watching the destruction of their golden child with wide, terrified eyes. The heavy, imposing double doors of the ballroom suddenly swung open. The estate manager walked briskly down the center aisle, his posture rigid, his heavy clipboard held securely under his arm. He bypassed Chloe entirely, marching straight toward my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Jefferson," the estate manager announced, his voice cutting sharply through Chloe's hysterical sobbing. "As previously stated, the rental contract for this venue has been officially voided due to severe fraudulent financial delinquency." He pulled a thick, legally binding document from his clipboard and forcefully shoved it directly into Desmond's trembling hands. "This is the final itemized invoice for the evening." The estate manager continued, his tone entirely devoid of any professional courtesy. "It includes the original $50,000 venue fee, an additional $20,000 in immediate cancellation penalties, and the outstanding invoices for the catering and floral teams, which we are legally obligated to collect on their behalf. You have exactly 48 hours to wire the total balance of $95,000 to our corporate holding account." If the funds do not clear by Monday morning, our legal department will immediately place a hard lien on any remaining assets you possess, and we will aggressively pursue wage garnishment. Desmond stared down at the massive invoice, his hands shaking so violently that the thick paper rattled audibly. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a final, desperate, pleading terror. "Naomi," he whispered, his voice completely broken. "We do not have it. DeAndre took everything. He took the equity from the house. He drained the retirement accounts. We literally have nothing left. We are completely ruined." I looked at the man who had ordered me out the back door just 2 hours ago. I looked at the woman who had called me an evil, jealous spinster. I felt absolutely no obligation to save them. "Then I highly suggest you start packing, Dad," I replied smoothly, turning my back on them completely. "Because the bank is definitely going to foreclose on that house by the end of the month." I walked purposefully down the center aisle of the empty ballroom, my heels clicking sharply against the polished wood. I did not look back at the untouched, towering wedding cake. I did not look back at my weeping sister. I did not look back at my financially ruined parents. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors and walked out into the cool, quiet Atlanta night, leaving the toxic, burning wreckage of my family entirely behind me. 1 year later. The rapid, merciless passage of 365 days proved to be the ultimate equalizer. When the heavy, polished doors of the Monarch estate closed behind me that night, they permanently sealed the fate of the Caldwell family. The swift, brutal collapse of their meticulously curated social empire was absolute, leaving zero room for any miraculous high society resurrection. Desmond and Vivian, the once proud, arrogant pillars of Atlanta, affluent Black church community, lost absolutely everything to the unrelenting machinery of the banking system. The massive, fraudulent second mortgage DeAndre had secretly taken out on their sprawling childhood home triggered an immediate, aggressive foreclosure. They were forcefully evicted by the county sheriff just 3 short weeks after the disastrous canceled wedding. The elite, status-obsessed friends they had sacrificed my entire life to impress completely abandoned them overnight. Pastor Williams quietly but firmly asked Desmond to step down from the church elder board, citing the severe, embarrassing public scandal. My parents now rent a tiny, cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a rapidly declining suburb, driving a rusted 10-year-old sedan. Their grand, boastful social media accounts have been entirely deleted, their glamorous digital footprints completely erased from existence. DeAndre Sterling, the charismatic velvet-wearing predator who orchestrated their total destruction, did not fare any better. The federal authorities built an ironclad, undeniable case against him using the comprehensive financial evidence I had efficiently provided. He pled guilty to multiple severe counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. He is currently serving an 8-year sentence in a maximum security federal penitentiary, completely stripped of his tailored suits and his fake rented luxury. Chloe, the former golden child, an untouchable pageant queen, experienced the most devastating reality check of all. The glittering, wealthy lifestyle she felt she was inherently owed vanished into thin air. Without my financial safety net to catch her, she was forced to confront the harsh, unforgiving consequences of her own cruel vanity. She is now a single mother, working grueling, exhausting shifts as a retail cashier at a discount department store just to afford basic necessities. Her once famous, highly curated lifestyle coaching platforms are completely dead. She vanished entirely from the public eye, deeply ashamed of her spectacular, highly publicized fall from grace. She tried calling my corporate office twice during the harsh winter months, desperately asking for financial assistance for the baby. I instructed my executive assistant to politely, firmly decline her calls and permanently block the number. I had warned her that the real world demands actual payment for mistakes, and she was finally paying her tab. As for me, my reality looks vastly different. I am currently sitting behind a massive custom-built mahogany desk in my sleek glass-walled corner office. The panoramic, breathtaking view of the bustling Atlanta skyline stretches out brilliantly before me, a beautiful, sprawling testament to the power of authentic, relentless hard work. The brilliant morning sunlight catches the sharp, clean edges of the high-rise buildings, reflecting the immense, undeniable success of Apex Holdings. My private equity firm has tripled its market valuation over the past 12 months. We successfully navigated the turbulent economic landscape, acquiring several highly profitable distressed luxury properties and transforming them into incredibly lucrative commercial assets. I no longer have to hide my immense wealth or actively downplay my corporate dominance to accommodate the fragile, insecure egos of my toxic relatives. I am fully, unapologetically walking in the absolute fullness of my hard-earned power. I command respect in every single boardroom I enter, not because I wear flashy rented designer labels, but because my financial acumen and my strategic brilliance are entirely undeniable. However, true lasting success is never just about accumulating massive amounts of capital. It is about actively using your acquired power to create meaningful protective barriers for those who are genuinely vulnerable. This morning, I officially launched the Apex Independence Initiative. It is a comprehensive, fully funded nonprofit foundation specifically designed to provide robust financial literacy, education, emergency independence grants, and vital legal resources to young Black women facing severe financial abuse and toxic familial manipulation. I created this foundation to actively dismantle the exact same predatory superficial dynamics that nearly consumed my own life. I want to ensure that no young woman ever feels forced to sacrifice her personal dignity, her credit score, or her future stability, just to appease the shallow, demanding expectations of a status-obsessed family. We are teaching them how to read complex financial contracts, how to safely secure their personal assets, and how to identify the subtle, dangerous red flags of charismatic predators like DeAndre. We are giving them the heavy ironclad armor they need to confidently protect their own empires. I stood up from my desk, walking slowly toward the towering glass window. I looked out over the sprawling, vibrant city, feeling a profound, deeply satisfying sense of absolute peace. I took a slow, deep breath, savoring the incredibly sweet, unmatched taste of genuine hard-won freedom. They said I was socially unfit because I refused to play their exhausting, pathetic game of smoke and mirrors. They completely ostracized me because I would not smile and eagerly participate in their fake, shallow, high society illusion. They were absolutely right. I did not play the game. I bought the entire board. Family is not determined by shared blood or mere genetics. It is determined by unwavering mutual respect. And respect is the one bill you must always, always pay in full. The ultimate revenge was never just about destroying their pathetic lives. It was simply about building up mine. I am no longer the forgotten sister standing in the shadows. Today my ledger is finally clear, completely balanced, and beautifully closed forever. I am the architect of my own incredibly bright, fiercely protected, and truly magnificent future. I have finally secured my profound peace and my absolute happiness permanently free from their toxic control.